Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. We have a lot to talk about today. There's quite a bit going on in the world of Mississippi State athletics, plus quite a bit I want to talk about in the world of television and in movies. Well, not movies so much, but we'll get into a little bit of that. Trying something a little bit different. I don't know how much this is working or how well it's working, but I am trying to go live on Twitter this morning as I record. So I'm hoping to add this as a consistent part of how we do the show. So if you are one of those that follows me on Twitter, you can catch it whenever I actually record. So like I said, we are going live this morning as we record on Twitter as well. So, but if you're listening to the podcast after it is already recorded, you can catch me on pretty much any podcast platform that is out there. You can catch me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can actually watch it on Spotify as well. I do the video podcast and upload it to Spotify, and they do the video. I do it on YouTube as well. As always, please, if you're listening and you enjoy the show, if you can rate the show on whatever platform that you're getting it on, if you can subscribe, follow, whatever it is, however it is that you're choosing to consume the podcast, it would really help me out a lot if you were to, like I said, hit the subscribe button as well, or the follow button, whatever it is that they offer on however it is that you choose to follow. You can also catch me on TikTok. I've gotten quite a bit of response and quite a bit of interaction on TikTok as well. I'm also doing shorts on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all that fun stuff. So if you're wanting to follow, I would appreciate it, and it would do me a lot of good. So, all right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this. We've got a lot to talk about. We won't spend a lot of time on Mississippi State stuff today because there's not a whole lot going on outside of a basketball game tonight against Georgia Tech. And I'll be honest, I don't know that much about Georgia Tech, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I will talk about it. But the big thing that is going on today, this is the early signing period. It's basically the actual signing day. There are some student athletes who end up waiting until the regular signing day, but that's very few and far between. Most of them go ahead and get in the boat during the early signing day, and it's even earlier than it used to be. Now, let's go ahead and talk about just the state of high school recruiting and what this means in general. It's a little bit harder to gauge exactly how important this day is in this day and age that we live in with the transfer portal, with NIL. A lot of schools have not taken quite as much of, it's taken a little bit of their focus off of high school recruiting simply because you can do a lot more in the transfer portal, and it's also harder to convince an incoming freshman, that may not get immediate playing time, that they need to wait around for a year or two and stick it out, but they'll eventually get on the field. Most kids don't want to do that. They want to play immediately. So it's much more difficult these days to convince kids, hey, go ahead and come to our school. Yeah, you may have to wait a year or two before you get significant playing time, but we want to get you on to our team. So this is the dilemma that you have with high school recruiting, and Mississippi State especially has to worry about this because the prospects you typically sign out of Mississippi State are typically not the high 5-star, high 4-star guys. You end up filling your roster with a lot of 3-stars, and you try to get in as many 4-stars and a 5-star too that you can. And we'll talk about it specifically with Mississippi State's recruiting class here in just a second, but it does make it a little bit more difficult. It does make it hard to evaluate and to try to figure out who can get on the playing field quickly and who's going to have to wait, because those that have to wait probably won't be with your program after a year or two. Mississippi State just lost a player to the transfer portal that they really were hoping that they could hold on to, and that's Stonka Burnside. They were really hoping they could keep a hold of him, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. So, like I said, this is what you have to deal with in the world of high school recruiting these days. You got to be able to make evaluations, and you got to figure out who it is that's going to be able to help you quickly, because if they can't help you soon, they probably won't be with you in the long run. And you have to figure out how much with NIL, you have to figure out how much you're going to pay these people. And you have to just know that some of them, unfortunately, may just end up being wasted dollars. And that's just kind of that's just the thing that you have to deal with nowadays. So, look, high school recruiting is still important, though. You got to be able to get the best schools are still going to be building their rosters around high school recruits. And you still see the Georgias, you still see the Alabamas, you still see the LSUs, you still see the Ohio States, the Oregons. They're still putting 4 and 5 star caliber players onto their roster, and they're still signing those guys. So you still have to do really well with high school recruiting. The difference is if some of those players don't pan out or they don't get on the field quite as quickly as they want to, that's where Mississippi State needs to try to go in and pick those players up. That's what happened with Anthony Evans. He was at Georgia. He wasn't getting the playing time that he wanted. And so Mississippi State swooped in and picked him up. And look, Anthony Evans had a really good year. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to try to tell you that he didn't, or that he wasn't a good player for Mississippi State. But if you look at some of the drops that he had and some of the times when he would pop up, when the ball would hit him in the hands and it would pop up and lead to an interception, that happened a couple of times. So you can kind of see why he struggled to find playing time at Georgia. And if he can clean that up, he's got pro potential, but he's got to clean that type of stuff up to be able to consistently work at the pro level. So like I said, it's interesting to see how all this stuff plays out, and Mississippi State is going to have to make sure that they are still evaluating properly and getting the guys that they want on the field. Now, I was concerned about Mississippi State's recruiting up until Monday. They were really struggling, and they were really trying hard to figure out what they were doing as recruiting. I was really worried about this. I didn't know. I was getting ready to come onto this show and just completely bash the coaching staff for not taking this seriously, but they get a big pickup on Monday. Braylon Womack from Hartfield Academy in Flowood, Mississippi. He ends up decommitting from Auburn and commits to the Bulldogs. Look, I have not been following to see who has sit in their letters this morning. I'm hoping that he's one of the first ones to do so. I haven't seen it, but my guess is there's probably going to be signings, ceremonies, all that kind of stuff. So this helped a lot. Mississippi State went from like around 50 in the recruiting rankings all the way up to about 30. There's been a little bit of movement. Vanderbilt got their own 5-star player, which is just, that in and of itself is just shocking. The fact that they got a 5-star themselves. They got a 5-star quarterback, I think the number 1 recruit in the entire country, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong about that. But they got a 5-star quarterback. They picked it up from, I think, Georgia, maybe, possibly. I'm not sure. I don't remember who they got because he decommitted and then committed to Vanderbilt. But just a new world that we're living in, which Vanderbilt is getting 5-star players, and it sent them a little bit higher than Mississippi State. So Mississippi State has dropped back down to 32. They are still hoping to get a couple of flip recruits before they sign their papers today. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But I will say this is the first time since I started up this podcast that I can say something positive about Mississippi State. Look, one of the things that you have going for you, if you're a Mississippi State fan, if you're on the Bulldog coaching staff, is you've got an opportunity with Lane Kiffin heading for LSU. You've got an opportunity to pick up some recruits. Look, there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be available. You're going to have players from Florida, from Auburn, from LSU, from Ole Miss, trying to think, Kentucky. You're going to have a lot of players who are probably going to be hitting the portal, and you need to pick them up. And if you can use this momentum, if you can create any kind of momentum here on signing day, picking up a few players that you weren't expecting, it could help you going into that portal, and you can kind of get some guys on board. The one thing that I will give Jeff Lebby credit for, by putting Kamario Taylor in during the Egg Bowl and showcasing him, even if it was way too late, even if it should have happened a lot sooner than it did, by putting him in the Egg Bowl, showcasing him, and just letting Kamario Taylor put some incredible footage on highlight reels, you can show to recruits, you can show to guys that are entering the portal, hey, look, we're going to build around this guy. This is a guy who's special. This is a guy who can come in and make a difference immediately when we start playing him more. And like I said, it still makes you kind of frustrated they didn't do it earlier. I get that. I'm right there with you. So I understand the frustration, but that's something that they can offer, and that's something that they can provide to potential recruits. So like I said, it can be a bit of a momentum jumper. We'll see if it is. We'll see. They still got to get everybody sending their letters. It's never done until their signatures hit, the dotted line, and Mississippi State gets the papers in. via the old fax machine. So, like I said, we're still waiting. I know some people have started sending them in. The quarterback that they had committed, Mississippi State's Brody McWhorter, I think was his name. I saw him very briefly on Twitter before I signed on to get started recording. So, like I said, this could be something that pushes us in the right direction. So we'll see. I don't know. It's more encouraging than I thought it was going to be, because up until now, Mississippi State hadn't really. I mean, look, Mississippi State has never been a recruiting powerhouse. They just haven't, and that's okay if you're going to make good evaluations. That's the one thing that Dan Mullen did. He never had just great recruiting classes. I think the best recruiting class he had was the 2015 class, when I think it was like number 17 or 18 in the country, and that was about as high as they got. But he always made really good evaluations. I mean, he looked at Dak Prescott and he saw something there, and look what he turned into. There's countless others that were, 3-star players that ended up being great. Tevez Calhoun was a 2-star, and he turned into one of the more productive players that Mississippi State has had while he was there. Like I said, so these are the types of things that you can see and that you can build upon. But Jeff Lebby and his staff are going to have to be just as good at evaluation as Dan Mullen and his staff was, if they're going to produce the same type of results with the same type of recruits. So we'll see if he can do it. I haven't been real hopeful that he can these first 2 years. Let's see if it gets better as we go into the future. So the only other Mississippi State thing that's going on currently is the basketball team has a game tonight against Georgia Tech in the ACC, SEC. I guess, is that what's taking place tonight? I can't remember, but basically, it's an SEC, ACC challenge. Mississippi State will take on Georgia Tech. I'm guessing that Georgia Tech is probably the favorite. Look, they're not as good as they sometimes are. I was looking at their record. I think they're like 5-3. So, look, this is a game you can win. They're not a great team. They're okay, but they're not great. They're 5-3, but Mississippi State's not great either. They're 3-4. They've lost basically against any good team that they played, and then plus you have New Mexico on there as well. So you got to win this game. You do. I hate to say that you're at a must-win point in the season when you're playing your 8th game of the year, but at this point you just are. This team has struggled immensely. They had an opportunity to get a win against SMU this past Friday, which would have been great for Mississippi State fans because you had such a bad day at the Egg Bowl. If you could have come home, turned on the basketball team, see them beat a good SMU team who was 7-0 at the time, it would have been a nice little boost to Mississippi State fans. But unfortunately, they end up blowing the lead and end up losing the game against SMU. So, like I said, you don't have a whole lot. You're running out of opportunities to make up for this poor start. You still got a game against Utah that you're going to have to go on the road against. That doesn't look real promising at this point. You still got a home game against Memphis. Now, Memphis has not been very good either. They've really struggled, just like Mississippi State has. So you got to find a way to get a good win. And you don't have a whole lot of opportunities on the schedule before you get to SEC play after you play Georgia Tech, after you play Utah. Excuse me. I'd have to look at the rest of their schedule, but you got some cupcakes on there as well. And the reason why you scheduled the way you did this year was because you kind of had faith in 4th-year Chris Jans that he could have a pretty good non-conference showing. And he normally has. I mean, that's the one thing that he's done really well the first 3 years. His non-conference, the way the Bulldogs play the non-conference is always really good. But unfortunately, that has not been the case this time around. So can they get off the mat? Can they find a way to get a win against Georgia Tech on the road tonight? I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they really need to be able to find one. So I'm hoping that tonight is the night. So, all right, let's talk about some television stuff. If you were just listening for the Mississippi State stuff, I want to transition to some television stuff. I've been talking about Pluribus. I've talked about it quite a bit. I didn't talk about it in the last week's show because I just had a chance to watch it. But when I watched episode 5 this past week, without trying to get into too much of a spoiler, one of the things I like what they did in this show, and I've been wondering if they were going to do it, just because of the way that the show is set up on Apple TV Plus. The way it is set up is Carol is kind of going against the world. Now, I kind of figured at some point they were going to put Carol in an episode all by herself, and that's what they end up doing for pretty much the most part in episode 5. It's basically her by herself. We get a shot of one of the other unlicked or unkissed or whatever it is that we're calling these hive mind people, but we see one of them, and that's it through for this episode. We see that one person, and then for the most part, it's just Carol by herself. There's a lot of really good moments in this where she is trying to communicate to the rest of the people who aren't affected by the hive mind, and she starts to become a little bit more self-aware. Like, she can't just insult these people. She wants their help, because she is incredibly rude and incredibly hard to like, and they recognize that at points. But this is basically her by herself, and she starts to figure out what's going on with these people. She's kind of pointing herself. She's starting to look at what they do and how they act, and it leads her to this production facility of this liquid they drink. And we end the episode with her pulling back the plastic on something, and we don't know what it is. We can't really tell at this point, but she pulls the plastic off of it. She gasps because she's just taken aback by what she sees. And this is where the episode ends. And obviously, when we see episode 6, I think it will come on Apple TV Plus tonight or tomorrow. I don't remember when, but when it does, we'll finally find out what it was that she saw. So, like I said, this is really good television. It just is. It's going to end up being one of my favorite shows of the year. I don't know that it's going to finish. I'd have to look at the timing of it. I'm not sure that's going to finish by the time we get to the end of the year, but I'm probably going to go ahead when I do my top 10 episodes, my top 10 television shows of 2025. We'll be far enough into it that I'll probably go ahead and include it on my list somewhere, and it will be somewhere on there. Exactly where, I don't know yet, but it's just an amazing show. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it's kind of depressing, but it's also kind of funny at times. It goes between moods really well. Like I said, I've just really enjoyed the show, and can't recommend it enough to people who are looking for something else to watch. I would highly recommend this one. So, one other thing I've done on the television front, I've got a few podcasts that I listen to. So if you're looking for like really good TV and movie podcasts, I listen to a lot of the Ringer podcasts. I think they're really good. I listen to Midnight Boys. I listen to the House of R, which is Joanna Robinson and Mallory Rubin. And also really love the Prestige TV podcast when it's Joanna Robinson and I can't remember the guy's name. He's one of the younger guys. And he does basketball coverage as well, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But I really enjoy it when those two get together. And apparently they are getting ready to do a rewatch of Lost. And they're going to be, because whatever his name is, like I said, I cannot remember his name to save my life at this point. But he just finished watching Lost. And so I decided, since they're going to be covering on their podcast, I'd go back and watch it. And guys, it's been so long. I forgot how good this show was when it started. If you listen to Ryan Nelson and I, when we were covering television and movies on the Main Attraction podcast, we had a rating system, and basically our 4-star rating, we had what would have been like a 5-star rating, but we used television shows as our rating system. And our top of the line was Succession, but right underneath Succession, what would have been our 4-star rating would have been Lost. And the reason why it wasn't at the top of the list was because of how it ended. And it's been a long time since I saw it, but that I just very much remember being disappointed by the way that Lost ended. But this show was really one of the best shows, and it was one of my favorite shows for a very long time, just because it was so intriguing. It was so compelling to watch. And I really forgot that. I was watching, like I said, went back, started rewatching the first season. I'm about 4 or 5 episodes into it. We haven't even gotten to the Benjamin Linus part of it yet. I mean, the show just finds a completely different level when he comes onto the show. But sitting there watching it, I just was remembering throughout the course of this entire thing, like how good this show is and just how amazing it was there during that first season. Because this is the first real mystery box show that we get, and so many other shows have tried to do the same thing. They've tried to create their own mystery boxes and tried to do their best to really bring people in by by creating, what's going on in this place, what's really happening. Now, and that was kind of the thing with Lost. Like, where are they? What's so special about this island? What is it about the island that all these weird things are happening? The very first or second episode, a polar bear shows up on a tropical island, and they just do all these really weird things to make you ask questions and to try to point you in the right direction. And one of the frustrating parts about Lost was you had this issue where, because they were 22, 23 episode seasons, they had to like spread it out. So like they would like open up a mystery and then they wouldn't come back to it to like 2 or 3 episodes. So you kind of had that issue. You don't really have that in television shows today. Typically, if they open up a mystery, they start addressing it at the very next episode. But like I said, it's still just a great show. If you haven't gone back and rewatched it, or if you've never watched it, I would highly recommend it. It does end. It is a disappointing end. I'll be very interested to see if I'm as disappointed with the ending as I was when it first came on the air, because I think one of the things I remember when it was first on the air, I was very much in the throes of young fatherhood. I had, I guess my son was probably like 3 or 4 years old at the time, and watching television was not at the top of my priority list. So I was sporadically watching and trying to get caught up, and I'll be interested to see if that had anything to do with just my overall impression of the show. So looking forward to the rewatch of it, and looking forward to continuing to see what it unfolds. I'll give more thoughts on it in later episodes, and I'll give more thoughts about just what I've thought about it as I get closer to the end of season 1. Last thing I want to talk about, I haven't talked too much about video games on this podcast, but I do want to talk about one real quick. Today is Wednesday, December 3rd. Tomorrow, Thursday, December 4th, we are finally getting a new Metroid Prime game. Metroid Prime 4 comes out tomorrow on Nintendo Switch 2. Technically, it comes out on Nintendo Switch. I have no idea how this game is going to run on the original Switch, but if you haven't upgraded yet, then it is there for you. But very excited about this. A few of my favorite games, despite the fact that Nintendo kind of gets a bad rap, my favorite games typically come from Nintendo. I mean, I was a huge Zelda fan. Those are typically my favorite games. I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom. Metroid was right there with it. I love Castlevania. And now Castlevania has kind of expanded into other platforms, but like I said, a lot of the Nintendo franchises are some of my favorite games. And I was thinking back today as this game was getting ready to come out, and I got to wondering, was the original Metroid the first woke video game? If you're old enough to have remembered the original Metroid, it came out in the 1980s when the Nintendo originally released. And I remember when we got our Nintendo and we started, Metroid was one of the first games that we got. And you were reading the instruction booklet, because back then games came with instruction booklets. They weren't really long, but they didn't have like these tutorials that showed you how to play. You actually had to go read an instruction booklet to learn how to play it. There was no like, here's an early level that shows you how you actually play this game. But when you're reading the instruction booklet, they basically tell you that your protagonist's name is Samus Aran. They don't tell you if it's a man or if it's a woman. We just assume that it's a man, that they're wearing this big bulky spacesuit and doing all this athletic stuff. And every protagonist in a video game had always been a dude. That's the way it always was. So I and all my friends who were playing the video game at the time, when we were kids, we were sitting there playing it, and we just assumed that whoever was underneath that mask and underneath that armor was a guy. And I don't remember exactly how you unlock it, but if you complete the game, and you had to complete it with like certain time parameters or something like that, I don't remember. And like I said, I don't know how they kept up with all this, because their saving system was just very different than it is today. In which, if you were playing the original Metroid, you had like write down like this 32 character code and re-enter it every time that you wanted to restart the game and pick up from where you were. It was always like that. It's kind of convoluted, but that was the way that you saved back in the original Nintendo days. But if you completed the game with whatever standard that the game determined, when you got to the top of after you kill Mother Brain and you get to the very top of the shaft that you have to get off the planet, Samus is like standing there looking at you while they're telling you about, the story is wrapping up and they're telling you all this stuff about what happened and stuff. But if you complete it with whatever parameter that they determined, her helmet comes off and it reveals to you that Samus is a woman. And this like just blew our minds back in the 1980s because Samus was a woman. Nobody ever assumed that. I hadn't completed it yet. And somebody came and told me like, Samus is a girl. I was like, do what? Samus is a girl. And they showed us like, if you completed it where Samus took her helmet off and you could see the fact that it was actually a woman underneath the mask and underneath the helmet and inside the body armor, you could play the game through again without the body armor on and just her like in a shirt or whatever. I don't remember what it was, but so my question is, like I said, was this the first woke video game? Can you imagine if the 1980s had social media and everybody's playing Metroid at the time, and all of a sudden people start finding out that as they complete the game, that the Metroid protagonist was a woman. There's so much outrage about every time that a protagonist in a video game is a person of color or a woman or anything like that. There's so much outrage about it. I just wonder what it would have been like back in the 1980s. Because like I said, when we first started playing Metroid, we had no idea. We just assumed that it was a guy. And when we found out that it wasn't, it just kind of blew everybody's mind. So like I said, I was thinking about that with Metroid coming out tomorrow. It brought back some nostalgia and just made me think about what it would have been like in today's society. But just something to think about. So like I said, a little bit shorter show today. I'll probably have shorter shows until we get some more games on the slate. When we come back next week, we'll look back at the results of the basketball team. We'll see if the Bulldogs did close out pretty well on signing day. We also might just kind of do some of the states of college football and stuff like that. We may look at the playoffs and just see where everybody is because all the championship games have taken place this week. So I appreciate you guys listening. It's been fun doing this podcast, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you then.